Hey there, welcome back to Mr. J Plays Social Studies. So, today we're going to be talking a little bit about government while I play some Fortnite. Um, it's been a while, so right now we're not really having a continuation. I know I was supposed to do a continuation on the. I don't remember what I was supposed to be doing a continuation on, but that video never happened. So, here we are, making a new video, having a little bit of fun, playing some Fortnite. Um, However, today we're going to just be jumping right on in with our new topic. Uh, we were supposed to do the Incas and I never did a second part. My bad. New topic is government. So we're going to be talking a little bit about government in general. So let's sit back, I guess, relax, or you can watch me play. You can just listen to me play. That's not as fun as watching, though. You'll see me just do really bad though if you watch me play. So we're just gonna listen to me. Um, or not. Up to you. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. So essentially, we're gonna look at again, what is government? What are some types of governments? And why do we have it? Um, oh, I'm missing all my shots. Okay, well, we're gonna run. When in doubt, run. Um, Something's up we're going to talk about other than just the why we have government. We're also going to talk about the different parts of government. We're going to talk about how the government functions in terms of the people. So, most governments have three main parts. Typically, uh, these parts have different powers. You have your three main branches, which typically have some smaller branches, but in your three main branches, you have your executive, your legislative, and your judicial. Um, Now, for the most part, these different types of governments are broken up and divided with their powers evenly. We're just not going to talk about how I'm going to miss this jump like 5 more times after this. Um, yeah, I'm just kind of bad. We're lost over that. Typically, these powers are divided evenly, um, with your executive branch being your main branch. This is the person who leads. This is the person who is in charge. Um, in different branches of government, your executive branch typically looks at enforcing laws, and basically overseeing the government so that it doesn't collapse, essentially. Um, you have your different parts of government and different parts of the executive branch, different jobs that they have to do, such as managing other people, making sure that, I mean, people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and managing the situations that may arise within their government. Um, Typically, in most governments that we talk about, you have your executive branch being your president, or king or queen, or your prime minister. And I won't necessarily say in a dictatorship, only because in dictatorship it's mostly an executive branch. There is no legislative and judicial. Um, because as a dictator, they are basically the judge, jury, and executioner, if you will, um, which just means that they're the ones who's making all the rules, so it doesn't matter about the other other two branches, my bad. But in a traditional government, since when we're talking about monarchs and republics and democracies, things like this, you'll see more of the fact that it has a president or a prime minister or a king or a queen to run this branch. Now, next up, you have your legislative branch. Um, and these are the people who are in charge of actually making the laws and representing the people. Um, you will typically not see the executive branch actually making laws. Their job is just to enforce the laws that are made. Now, this does not mean that the executive branch um, cannot suggest laws. That's not quite how that works. Um, sorry, I gotta focus. Yeah, didn't see that coming. And now where I'm gonna miss all my shots. And I have no guns to hit. So anyway, back to our legislative branch. Um, these are the people who are actually for the people and look at making those laws to support the common good, if you will. Um, in a monarch, this is typically your parliament. In your democracies, this is your Congress. Um, and it can also be known as an assembly. These are just people who gather. It's typically never a small group of people, a part of your legislative branch, just because depending on how many people you're trying to represent, you have to get a full representation of people. So your legislators will typically engage in debates and vote on proposed legislation, either which legislation is just rules. When you think legislation, just think rules. These are just the rules that are being made and asked to enforced. Um, but most of these work by majority vote or popular vote. So I might use those interchangeably, but for the most part, I'll say majority vote because it is majority essentially it means the most. So rules are not necessarily official until they are voted on. After you have your legislative branch, you then jump to your judicial branch. This is essentially when people think of going to court, trial, judges. This is your judicial branch. These are the people who actually read these laws that the legislative branch makes, and they interpret them. So, in a sense, they're pretty much reading the laws, and then if they're enforcing the laws how they see fit. So the laws will most likely be written down and they have guidelines to go along with them. But in some cases, oh no, there's this person there. And they're about to chase me, of course. Anyway, um, these are people who are essentially being there, I guess, Another word for interpret is they're making sense of the laws. So, not to say the laws were made without making sense, but some laws are made with very general statements or things that can be understood in different contexts. So the judicial branch, their job is to make sense of these laws and then enforce them in a fair and consistent way. So this is where you'll see your courts, judges, and you have your lawyers who often play a role in making sense of laws, making sure people are represented fairly, um, arguing for the laws that are being made. So sometimes laws are made, and often people will have to argue for the laws because sometimes they can be understood wrong. Or not understood wrong, but understood differently. And so the judges and the lawyers are meant to make sure that people are getting their fair, getting a fair shake at the law. Now, obviously, that's something that is pretty hard to do consistently and fairly. So often you'll see not every case is handled the same, and sometimes cases have different outcomes than you would expect or they should. Um, so often we have things that allow people to have another shot at the law, I guess. Um, Essentially, in less words, people can challenge the laws or challenge the, I guess, ruling that they might get. But again, not all, it is not always the same, and people can do what is known as appeal many times before they might get a judge or a jury that agrees with their side and understands their side, or that essentially just, I mean, give them a fair trial. Um, Jumping over to more along the lines of the less about the three branches of government, but the three types of government. Obviously, all three of these are not the same. A democracy, a monarchy, and a dictatorship, or what's another word for dictatorship? I'm blanking on another word for a dictatorship, but we know what a dictatorship is. One ruler. Um, Empire. There we go. Um, Obviously, these are going to pose different problems. They're going to pose different challenges. And so, essentially, when your country is deciding government, um, you're trying to figure out a government that works for your country. So, if I have a country that is relatively small, I might not want a democracy because it it would I would never accomplish anything. There would be too many varying opinions. Whereas I might not want a democracy if the country is super large, because it would take forever to actually get the input from everybody in that everybody in that democracy. That would take way too long. But it's where you kind of have to decide country wise. Now, some most forms of government are not necessarily passed down, but they're kind of forced upon, in a lack of better words. Um, I'll use monarchy for an example. Typically, a monarchy is people given power based on their family. England, for a long time, had a monarchy. Well, they still do have a monarchy, but now it is less less about the monarchy itself and more about the parliament. The parliament is the one who basically runs the country. The king and queen are more, I wouldn't say for show, but they don't have as much power as a traditional when you think king and queen would. Um, their power lies mostly in the parliamentary is more of that longer. Sorry, not longer, but more group of people. Um, but this is hereditary. You don't typically enforce a monarchy for people who are not a part of a family. You'll often see this when we look at, I mean, England is the most popular monarchy, um, but there's other examples. Um, like, if you're looking at a monarchy, you typically it's gonna continue on even after people have passed. It falls in along in the next people in the family. It doesn't just stop because no one's there to fill the spot, because there will be someone there to fill the spot, as opposed to a dictatorship, which is typically power that is taken. Um, a dictatorship is often just one person ruling everything, and it's done mostly by force. You don't just, it's not like somebody just asked and was like, hey, can I run this country? And everybody was just like, oh, yeah. No, it typically comes in a time of war. Dictatorships rarely emerge during peace times, just because if it's peace, then there's some form of government that's holding everybody together. So it's not like the it's not like the dictatorship is just happening out of nowhere. No, typically comes during a time of war, civil turmoil, something along the lines of a unrest in the time. Um, Meanwhile, you have a democracy, which is um, it's actually one of the oldest forms of government, linked all the way back to ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks and Romans both, well, no, the Romans had a uh, republic. A republic and a democracy are both somewhat related. A A republic more is um, ruled by elected representatives. A democracy is more of everyone has a vote. Uh, Everyone has a say in their government. Now, within a republic, you have an elected few who are the ones who make decisions for the majority. These people are the ones who often are voted on by the people and given this power to rule. Now, in all three of these governments, the one thing they have in common is the fact that they are necessary to keep a country from falling, regardless of the kind of government, whether it be a dictatorship, a monarchy, a democracy, a republic. Um, these all have built a structure for a country to essentially not fall. Um, and I guess that goes to answer one of the biggest questions when surrounding government and why do we even have governments? Um, they, I mean, they basically dictate everything from what you do at home to what you do at work to what you do, in your case, maybe go to school. Um, Government is going to shape that. Government is going to tell you what you can and can't do. Government is going to set laws and rules to determine what can and cannot be done. Now, without government, we wouldn't we would eventually fall into turmoil, or we would fall into unrest, a period of unrest. Um, and typically this is known as anarchy. And an anarchical state, or a state of anarchy, is essentially there is no rules, there is no laws, there is no government. It is just people doing things because they can and want to. It's not based on anything in particular, and typically the people in a anarchical society, um, I, I mean, usually don't last long. Um, Now that might just be because there is no rules, but it could very well just be because it is a state of anarchy. There is nobody to say, "Hey, you shouldn't be doing that," because there is no government. That's why it's an anarchy state. So this is essentially why we have government, to make sure that we don't go into anarchy. That's how come most governments um most governments emerge regardless of whether it is a good country or a bad country, a small country, whether they have money or they don't. Um, it all depends on that government. One of the greatest things about government is, regardless of the form of government it is, albeit even a dictatorship, now it's less less prominent or less seen, but everybody a part of a government is held accountable, even the people who run the government. It is not something where people can just do stuff and get away with it because they're a part of the government. No, everybody follows those rules. Um, Now, one of the big things about governments, especially if you're talking the government that you might have, whether it be a monarchy or a democracy or a republic. Um, the bad thing about a government is that, for the most part, you have a voice. You're allowed to be informed about what's going on in the government. You can participate with it. You can make sure those people in charge are being held accountable for the things they do. And you can just be a good person. And I mean, you solve half of what a government is trying to do. Um, One of the last points I want to make about government before I run out of time, um, because my game is coming to an end, and it's an interesting one. It is an interesting end, I will say. um, One of the big things about government is that it is something that typically doesn't end. Um, Regardless of whether a government falls or not, it will have something to replace it. In the first world societies that we live in today, even the third world societies that we live in today, which these are just people um, who don't have access to the same things that you might. Um, Nothing quite ever remains in a state of anarchy. There's always some form of government. With that, um, the biggest thing to remember is everyone has rules to follow. No one is above those rules, regardless of what people may think. No one is above rules. Everyone has some form of rules to follow. Now, obviously, this is not the only thing about government, but this is a very long winded start. But the best thing you can do as someone who may or may not be able to impact government quite that much, um, essentially, the best thing you can do is remember there is always more to learn, not only with government, with life, but especially with government. The best thing you can do is just to stay up to date and essentially remember you can change anything you put your mind to. Now, we're going to watch me um, go ahead and play this last bit of this game. And we'll talk about it a little bit because uh, I should have won. Spoil. I did not win. But we're going to see that I miss my shots here. I'm going to just shoot the car. And I run out of ammo. He can still see me even though I'm crouched. I should have won that game, but here we are. Well, all in all, that was Mr. J Plays Social Studies, Government Edition. Thanks for watching.